Bonjour à tous, on se retrouve de nouveau sur The Last of Us Partout Remastered pour passer ensemble sur les 3 niveaux perdus, des niveaux qui n'ont pas été gardés dans la version définitive du titre et qui sont disponibles dans ce remaster de The Last of Us Partout, donc sur PlayStation 5. On va les découvrir ensemble et commencer par Fête de Jackson. Je suis assez curieux de voir ce que ça va donner. On va se mettre la vidéo d'introduction de Neil Druckmann ainsi que les commentaires des développeurs. Let's go! Bon, ça pour le coup, je l'avoue que je l'ai déjà en partie découvert lors justement d'un live découverte des nouveautés sur la chaîne YouTube, la chaîne du geek. Mais il y aura quand même quelques trucs que je n'ai pas encore fait et pour le reste des niveaux, ce sera la nouveauté.
The reason we added this section is there are a few sequences, and we picked the 3 of the best ones, that we cut from the game. You know, often we build a game that's much bigger.
C'est comme un film, en général, ils tournent plus que ce qu'ils vont garder dans la version qui sort au cinéma. C'est assez classique.
But we wanted to give you an insight of what it's like when we built the game, because often we have this whole thing constructed and it doesn't have final art or audio or dialogue. And here you get to see the building blocks of what it's like when we first string.
Oui, vous allez voir, les textures sont pas toujours terminées, etc.
This is the intro to the first deleted level, and this one is the roughest of the 3. We wanted to show more of how Jackson operates. So this is the festival where Ellie ultimately kisses Dina. This sequence would have come very late in the game as a flashback sequence while you're in the farm with Dina. And we wanted to show what is the rest of Jackson doing, and wanted to put on the stick, make it interactive. So you could see when you're outside, there are all these almost like carnival games that you can play. You could mix drinks, you could play with these kids that are playing a sort of clicker Marco Polo, sit down and listen to conversations. And all the different interactions were first or second pass, very, very early passes. The building blocks are there, but nothing is final. And ultimately, while we were very excited by this sequence, it's pretty fun and lighthearted. It just slowed things too much as we're barreling towards the end of the story at this point. So again, reminder, rough, missing audio, missing animation, missing gameplay tweaks, missing dialogue, but pretty representative of what it would have been. So enjoy.
Il n'y a pas de voix dans ce premier niveau supprimé. Ce sera le cas pour les autres niveaux normalement, mais pour celui-là, il n'y en a pas. Et vous verrez qu'au niveau des animations, etc., notamment là, bon, quand elle boit, voilà, on sait que Naughty Dog est capable de faire bien plus beau. Mais là, ils sont allés à l'essentiel. Enfin, et surtout, ça, c'est juste histoire que le niveau fonctionne, mais on voit que le bâtiment en face, que les textures sont pas au point. Et on a les petits commentaires des développeurs en VO.
This level was going to transition us to farm. We would go all the way through to the dance, where Ellie and Dina share their first kiss. Then we would play through farm, and when Ellie plays the guitar at night, she would remember the Seth incident. So, the opening for this was a little tricky. We needed it to match at least a little what you might expect emotionally coming from prior beats, because we were already purposefully disorienting you in time and space. Remember, you just came from this huge fight. To jump straight into it would have been a little too jarring. After some back and forth, we rooted it in Ellie's nerves, calling back to her hands shaking in the theater. But this time, for a much more innocuous reason we'll find out later. She's nervous because she has a crush on Dina, who is the only reason why she's here at the dance. Something we really wanted to do was highlight the way their lives had turned upside down since she went down this path.
Petit commentaire développeur, en vrai j'adore le concept.
Contextualizing all of our usual gameplay mechanics that were designed for really violent ends. The workbench, door bashes, throwable weapons, and even the infected, which is my personal favorite. Peppered throughout the level are moments of levity or shared history, all the while seeing how happy and mundane they all were before her huge revenge odyssey. It is not a festival without one of these throwing games. This one, of course, uses our throwable system where you're often chucking explosive things or stunning things, but for a more wholesome purpose, although some people take this game really seriously. A fun aspect of this is if you did well, you could win a toy here. Ellie would place it in her pocket. If you had done this, you'd find the toy with JJ, the baby, later back at the farm. When we cut this, the toy made it through anyway because it was so cute. It is the same one you see on the tractor at the farm. Ollie the elephant.
Oh, c'est intéressant après ces anecdotes de se dire qu'ils ont pensé à la base d'un truc qui au final qu'on retrouve quand même dans le jeu final, mais qu'on ne sait pas pourquoi, enfin d'où ça vient réellement. J'aime beaucoup ce genre d'anecdotes, c'est vrai qu'on voit beaucoup ça avec des Blu-ray, notamment pour des films, ou des DVD d'ailleurs, avec des bonus. Mais côté jeux vidéo, bah, c'est assez inédit en fait en réalité.
This is one of my favorite sections because I think that it achieves both the slice of life aspect of Jackson while also being a stark reminder of how dark the world that they live in really is. To attract attention and curiosity, one of the kids was supposed to make this adorable, messed up little clicker impression and the others would giggle. We tried a version where if you got close enough, the kid might try to follow you a little before turning back. Since clickers are blind and move by echolocation, for this game of messed up tag, Ellie must close her eyes and listen for when the children give themselves away. The thought was that these kids are in relative safety. They still grow up with the dangers of clickers and runners, and all those lessons would embed themselves in the games that they play. When the festival got cut, they tried to preserve this moment and move it to the front of the game where the snowball fight is, as a tutorial. However, being in the headspace of a clicker doesn't really teach you how to deal with them. Eventually, it evolved, and they instead made the snowball fight, which was, I think, way more effective. For me, it's character illuminating.
Donc c'est une séquence qui aurait pu avoir au début du jeu, cette partie, enfin, ce petit combat là avec les enfants.
There's a familiarity with the kids that's really nice to see, especially because it's such a difference from the Ellie we see later, who has a sort of hollow normalcy that she's trying to get with JJ, but kind of fails.
C'est marrant de voir qu'en fait, ce niveau qui n'a pas été gardé au final, il y avait quand même certains éléments qu'ils auraient voulu reprendre ailleurs ou qu'ils ont repris ailleurs.
It's one of those little in-game scenes we peppered in to make it feel like Ellie had roots in the town. Hallie, our writer, mentioned that in her mind,
c'est du maquillage ou de la peinture qu'elle nous fait là parce que
tattooed her arm to cover up her scar. So we figured this might be the only time you get to see that. We wanted to hint at it and allude to it and make it feel like there had been so much more that had been happening and so much more that Ellie threw away.
Bon, ils ont pas animé le maquillage hein, du coup. Je rappelle encore une fois que c'est pas terminé, hein, je pense que vous l'avez remarqué. Je vois qu'il y a une petite séquence là-bas, normalement. Ah si, il y a une petite animation là déjà. Et je rappelle que c'est pas la séquence la plus sympa, hein. Apparemment les autres sont plus cool. Mais il fallait bel et bien qu'on commence par elle. Il y a même la manière dont il récupère le truc, tu sens que c'est pas fait, hein. Comme le disait Neil Druckmann, il aurait fallu quelques mois supplémentaires pour que ce niveau soit au point. Qu'est-ce qu'on a là?
There's a hidden spot at the back that was just a bit of fun. It was highlighting Jackson's normalcy with something we would find in a real world. In the back, you would find teenagers finding some alone time with each other in a dark corner of a party. It was rewarding the player for peeking into a hidden corner, but ultimately redirecting them back to the festival. We also had versions of them smoking weed here, despite Maria's consternation, probably having gotten it from Eugene.
La version où il fumait de l'herbe, ok, marrant. J'aime bien l'idée. Et je crois qu'on a fini. On a fini cette petite quête. Peut-être qu'on a raté des trucs. Mais bon, je pense qu'on a vu une grosse partie. Découvrons du coup le deuxième. Allons à Égout de Seattle. Avec toujours le petit message de Neil Druckmann au début. Bon, petit chargement évidemment avant.
In this second deleted level, which is an extended sequence of the sewers in Seattle, this comes on the heels of where Ellie goes into a building and she survives an attack by stalkers and gets thrown out of a window and gets swept away by the current. And then we cut this section that used to be there in the final game. Now you will get to play it. So this was a way to get a bit more interesting puzzles, interesting traversal, figure out how Ellie can navigate the sewers with the fighting current.
Oh, ok, un petit côté un peu
with a lot
puzzle.
of these levels and these sequences, the reason why we cut them more for pacing purposes. But here it is for you in this very kind of raw form that part of it will feel finished, parts of it will feel like assets are missing as far as audio, animation won't be final, but it's a glimpse into what a game looks like when it's months away from finishing. Enjoy.
C'est cool en vrai, ça aurait été une séquence, alors ça cassait le rythme. Mais une séquence, ouais, plus énigme.
Lâche-moi, putain!
Il y en a une dizaine environ. Non, c'est 3 niveaux supprimés au total. Let's go, on joue. Alors je suis pas très bon en énigme, on va voir ce que ça va donner.
Ok.
C'est un bug ou je peux... Normalement ça a dû être débugué quand même. Ah, il faut que je reste comme ça. Ok, je peux pas bouger la caméra. Ok. Oh voilà, c'est plutôt bien avancé. On voit que ça pourrait être mieux, mais ça va.
This level, internally known as Fine Nora, was quite long in duration as we had to make Ellie traverse a far distance to the opposite side of downtown Seattle. The sewer section was originally longer than what we released the game with, approximately 10 minutes more. This was one of the few areas of the game that used water flow as part of the traversal puzzle. The player has to go upstream to use the current to get to the platform to reach the other side. We mostly cut this mechanic game wide, however it remained in essence in the section swimming to the aquarium as Ellie when you were avoiding the waves.
Ah, faudrait qu'on écoute le dialogue là-bas. On va aller écouter le petit dialogue là-bas.
The ladder acts as an immediate goal for the player, but being able to climb out is not going to be so
On peut pas aller
easy.
plus loin.
To keep levels interesting and engaging, we alternate between positive and negative values the player experiences. Here, it's a positive to have found the ladder, but then a negative to discover it's not the solution. But then another positive to identify the next short-term goal of the doorway. By alternating between these opposing values, we give players what they expect, but not how they expect it.
Voilà comment il fallait faire. Donc, tunnel A.
When players reach the doorway and enter into the room, they're faced with a dead end. The real reason for this dead-end room is that on the reversal when exiting back out of the doorway, players are faced with the route onwards. A pipe that they'd not been able to see when they were swept past it on the way in, and something that was hidden from view when on the side platforms. The intention here being that the only option is to go off the standard path in order to search for a way out. When players reach the doorway and enter into the room, they're faced with a dead end. The real reason for this dead-end room is that on the reversal when exiting back out of the doorway, players are faced with the route onwards. A pipe that throughout the rest of the level we also use light to indicate to the player that they were heading in the right direction. At each turn, however, we block the direct route forward. Players would know that they just have to keep finding alternative paths, promoting those feelings of being desperate and trapped. We slowly introduce the player to consider climbing into smaller pipes and crouching in these tight spaces.
L'idée était cool, hein?
Build up to and encourage the player to climb into such a small pipe that they'd have to be crawling on their stomach, which is something that the player previously may not have recognised as a playable space, let alone the desired route they need to take. We added a tiny space just to reward the player's exploration with a pickup item, and we made sure it was something that made sense that you'd find in this area. A canister and all the garbage that had been washed into the sewers from the surface.
J'adore ce genre de... Enfin, le niveau, je comprends qu'il est retiré et tout, hein, mais j'adore l'idée là de voir justement le pourquoi du comment, pourquoi ça n'a pas été gardé.
We love the idea of making Ellie prone through a tiny dirty pipe in order to get out, as it was a great opportunity to use our prone mechanics. The unique camera setup was created to support crawling in these pipes, as the standard prone camera is much higher above the player. We also created custom collision in order for Ellie to manoeuvre in these tight spaces easily. Initially, the oblong collision capsule around her character caused issues crawling around corners. We put extra effort into the custom corner collision so the movement experience is as smooth as the main game. In order for the player to feel cramped, claustrophobic and desperate, we'd been enforcing the traversal mechanics that allow for a tight environment which promote these feelings. We introduced the use of the squeeze through so that we can keep the player feeling enclosed and tight, but without repeating the same geometry. Here we change from low ceilings and wider walls to high ceilings and tight walls to change up the spatial pacing and keep the level from repeating itself.
Il y a eu un vrai travail hein, sur ce niveau. À la limite, le niveau d'avant, on comprend un peu. Et là, c'est un vrai niveau quoi. Bon, je sais pas s'il y aura des affrontements ou quoi, je pense pas. Je suis pas sûr qu'ils ont mis du fight.
Originally, we had the waterline much higher here, so players had to swim through this tight tunnel. However, from watching user test feedback, it was occasionally causing people to discount the route entirely and turn back on themselves. So to avoid any risk of this happening in the final game, we present a lower water level so the tunnel is easy to see and commit to using. Although this isn't as impactful without a prone swim, it's the better decision as it means a smoother experience for the player with no backtracking frustration.
Ouais, c'est marrant, ils ont vraiment testé le jeu régulièrement et en fait, ouais, l'eau était plus haute et ils l'ont baissé parce que les joueurs n'étaient pas convaincus, enfin, étaient un peu effrayés par ça. C'est marrant.
We reveal what is further in this tunnel. A clicker that has sprouted and the fungus has grown on the sides of the pipe. It was great to see people who user tested this area becoming increasingly worried as we forced the player to squeeze past the fungus and inches away from the clicker's face, all the time not being sure whether the clicker might be alive or attack them. Although we aren't as cruel as to force a clicker attack in such close proximity, we do have a payoff for this moment. This clicker momentarily turned into Joel to show Ellie's PTSD from what happened to Joel at the start of the game. Ultimately, we decided to save this moment for the farm level, as it was more impactful there because it could become the centrepiece of that experience. Whereas in the sewers, we weren't able to make it as much of a narrative point and give it the breathing room and reaction time that it deserves, given the tight space.
Comment c'est possible ça? Ah. Bien dégueu, mais j'aime bien l'idée.
Oh merde!
Il y a un petit message là, on va aller l'écouter tout de suite.
For the final section, we eventually opened you out into a wider area as you traverse through such tight spaces leading up to this. So changing the environmental pacing makes it begin to feel like we're coming to the end of Ellie's ordeal. An earlier iteration used the current that we'd shown at the start for a slightly tougher traversal puzzle.
Ok, il y avait la même difficulté avec l'eau.
The ladder was clearly visible from most of the area, but the player was faced with a fast-flowing torrent of water they couldn't cross. If the player attempted to jump into the water, they were not able to swim across the ladder due to the water's speed. But instead, they had to traverse the pipe running along the top of the space in order to get across the water.
Ah oui, les claustrophobes, c'était pas la quête, effectivement. Après, on avait bien aussi une quête, ça c'était pas vraiment les... Si, c'est les égouts en vrai dans The Last of Us 1 aussi qu'il y avait. En vrai, la séquence, bon, peut-être qu'elle aurait été un peu plus longue en version définitive, mais c'est vrai qu'elle est pas longue. Hein.
Using this pipe was retained in the iteration we shipped with, as it's the last of the extreme methods Ellie has to undergo in order to escape the sewers, and what she will go through in her pursuit of revenge. The last ladder climb is quite lengthy, and although we could have trimmed it down to a shorter climb, we liked how this last segment of the journey built anticipation for whether there was success at the top or not after all you've been through. Ultimately, the ladder exits out into the subway station, which is how it connects in the final game. Ellie then has to find her way to the hospital from here, crossing paths with the scars for the first time.
Ça va. On aura vu pire comme calvaire, même si évidemment dans la version définitive, ça aurait été plus difficile avec l'eau en mouvement et tout. Ok. Passons sur le troisième. C'est court, mais personnellement, je trouve ça super intéressant. Et maintenant, direction la chasse. Let's go! Et on s'arrêtera là pour aujourd'hui.
For this third and final deleted level, what we call the boar hunt sequence, this was a sequence pretty late in the game. It was right after the whole Seattle Abby sequence where Abby spares Ellie. And then we wanted to come back into Ellie's story, but keep it a bit mysterious of how much time has passed, where is Ellie now? So we're coming in on Ellie and she's following a trail of blood. And we wanted to mirror in a way the deer hunt sequence from the first game, but this time do it with a boar. And there's something with Ellie that now she can't let go of this violence. She's pursuing it, even against this innocent animal. This was another opportunity to show how the violence that Ellie has experienced, the violence that she witnessed being afflicted onto Joel, is still sticking with her, and she's still experiencing these PTSD moments. This was a sequence that was pretty far along and was cut pretty late in production. Parts of it are still really rough, but the gameplay, the building blocks were all there. I think you'll have fun to see, like, again, a rough, unfinished sequence that you can play. You can see all the way to the end, and including a cinematic that we end up cutting. And the remnants of the sequence ended up being mentioned in Ellie's journal. So this part of the story that we developed still made its way into the game as kind of optional stuff that you could read about, but here you get to experience it. So as a reminder, this is pretty rough, months away from being finished, but you get to see it now.
Je me répète, hein, mais je trouve ça trop bien.
So the boar hunt was one of the hardest levels for me to work on. It was a huge challenge with the systems that we had, and we kept trying, but it never felt quite right. Originally, the level happened after the Jackson Festival, which also got cut, but before Farm. Once the festival got cut, it became the prologue to Farm. The intended experience is that we jump forward in time after the fight with Abby in the theater. We don't know where Dina is. We likely assume she's dead because she was just bleeding out. Ellie is alone, her hair is short, so maybe this is the future or the present. And she's hunting. Hunting who? Abby still? In early iterations of the fight, it was more arena-like.
Oh,
the player slowly whittles down the boar's health. Ellie gets more visceral and more vicious. We get a little worried about her. As the boar gets weaker, more panicked, more feral, and we start feeling sympathetic to the boar was the hope. In all of these iterations, especially of these wider areas, it required custom AI and scripting to make sure it continued to feel organic as an animal, but we really needed it to do specific stuff. It needed to be able to close distances really, really quickly. It needed to charge to attack, but we wanted the feeling of hunting, so we needed to track it down from afar. And we also needed to discourage the player from attacking the boar when it's that close, or it would kind of turn into this melee kerfuffle. How do we do this in our world while keeping the boar believable? We must have gone through 5 or 6 iterations of the boar fight and all, and every single time it changed pretty drastically. We split it into clear phases, where one was like all long range. We tried another where you're getting close and you get the jump on it quite literally. You're jumping off of a rock to attack it. And then finally, we tried a bunch where you almost sort of go around a bunch of trailers and try and wrestle it. We uncovered after some time that taking down a boar over several phases felt very laborious and a little dramatic. It was comically long, it felt too boss-like, a little too gamey. We decided to cut the first few phases, and we opted for a cold open after the boar had already been hurt off-screen. So that allowed us to focus on feeling like we're closing in on prey and to introduce the boar when it was at its most dangerous. Already hurt, already feral, much too close for comfort. And so the thinking was it would bring us more into Ellie's mindset. Is this really hunting for food, or is she hunting for some other reason? The gas station was built to highlight the boar's destructiveness. Since it's cramped, the boar feels larger. We also feel trapped with it, though perhaps it's trapped with us.
Ah ouais, mais il est balèze le sanglier. Il est dopé à quoi là, aux
This made it more aligned with Ellie's sort of hunting for trouble mindset. Listening became more important, as well as moving around slowly so it didn't hear you. Could you spot it before it saw or heard you? And could you get a shot off quickly enough so you could dodge out of the way? Or is the shot worth the cost after? It feels like a gamble. By the end of the fight, everything would likely be in shambles. The boar would burst through the back, and Ellie would fall away finally enact revenge.
C'est fini. Tu m'échapperas pas.
The boar kill was supposed to be anything but glorious, with the boar whimpering at the back of the...
Ouais, les gros mâles peuvent être énormes. Ah oui, non, je sais, hein, mais c'est abusé quoi. Mais oui, je sais, ça peut être très très gros un sanglier. Et bien voilà, c'est tout pour ces petits niveaux perdus. Clairement, on en voudrait plus, mais honnêtement, c'est le genre de concept que j'adore. C'est vraiment ce qu'on a en fait dans les bonus de DVD et Blu-ray côté film. Mais côté jeux vidéo, eh bien c'est du jamais vu. Enfin, du jamais vu, en tout cas, c'est assez inhabituel. Même je dis ça, j'ai jamais vu ça, donc c'est vraiment très cool de voir ça réellement et pas uniquement, à la limite des fois en vidéo ça peut se retrouver, mais vraiment où c'est jouable, c'est genre ultra rare. Et là on comprend un peu pourquoi ils ont été retirés, même si on sent effectivement que la dernière quête c'est quelque chose qui a été retiré assez tardivement. Et parce que c'est quand même assez important, en tout cas on comprend quand même l'alchimie, enfin le caractère du personnage sans ça, mais c'est vrai que on voit l'importance que ça aurait pu avoir sur ce dernier. Mais en tout cas merci d'avoir suivi cette petite vidéo et on se retrouve très vite pour la suite de mes aventures sur The Last of Us Part 2 Remastered.